I am really privileged to introduce a tremendous artist, a person whose life story could fill multiple volumes of incredible experiences, a person who has studied within mystery schools, within music, within psychology, a real modern Renaissance man that walks between the many realms, who is going to be sharing his knowledge of art, culture, psychedelics, and dreaming. Can we please get a huge round of applause for Gwyllm Llywdd?
It is now. So, thank you for coming. This is a wonderful turnout. I wouldn't be here without my co-presenters tonight. I'd like you to meet Ms. Psychotria Viridis. I would like you to meet Ms. Salvia Divinorum. And I do mean they are co-presenters, and they're one of the main reasons I'm actually here. So, she will talk to you, though. So I am of a certain age now. I get to wear these when I read things. I'm not going to be reading a lot, but I do have some backups. So what I wanted to do is discuss about plant-based methods for lucid dreaming. In our life cycle, we sleep about 1/3 of our lives. And for most people nowadays, it's, how would you say? It's almost utilitarian, you know. You sleep, it's a therapeutic sleep because you have to take a break between working, shopping, and commuting. And somewhere else in there fits your life. Dreams have almost been discarded. Even like within psychology and psychiatry, we have found that the idea of dreams have faded. And why have they faded? Well, they tend to get in the way of modern living. So we've always been in the pursuit since an earlier time, since the Reformation, of more efficiency. And that came in with the clock. If you think about it, before the clock, before everything was divided in hours, minutes, seconds, life was divided by what? Breath, walking, the rising of the sun, the setting of the sun, the stars, the moon, and the cycles of the seasons. Now, imagine for a bit, if you would, a world where there's no internal combustion engine, okay? You don't hear cars. You don't have the hum of electricity. You walk out in the middle of the night, and you have like the Milky Way just streaming above you. And on occasion, the moon comes, she waxes, she wanes, she's dark, she's full. And that is time. And it's not a straight line. It moves in a giant cycle. And in the older days, people would often wake up at night and sit around fires, say around midnight or 2. And this is written about quite a bit, actually, you know, where even in the wintertime, like in some place like France, peasants would sleep up to 18 hours at a time because, well, it's better to not be hungry, you know? So they'd get up and talk about their dreams and maybe have a potato or something like that. But dreams were important. Dreams were what guided people. Does anybody know the term ornamency? Does anybody know the term? Okay. So dreams were used for prediction. Dreams were used for healing. And it's a very valid school of approach. So I'm going to talk about some of the plants. I'm going to go back and forth. I'm kind of cyclic. I am not a straight-ahead person, okay? You can tell with the art. I mean, it's all over the place, okay? So Charles did mention that a lot of these items can be illegal, and it's true. And just to caution you, you can do time, but a little bit of caution goes a long way, okay? So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit here. First one I'm going to talk about is salvia. Okay. Salvia, I've been around salvia for about 25 years, and I had known about it for many years before that. And this plant right here is there's several clones that they talk about, but this plant right here looks fairly young. It could be thousands of years old because they don't propagate like some plants do. They kind of break off and reroot. And I've given away hundreds of cuttings from these plants. And they grow and they grow. Well, anyway, the relationship to the plant down in Mexico, in Oaxaca, is a very, very quiet one. Not really published and stuff like that. And there's like two methods to use. The traditional method is by what's called the quid. Does anybody know about this? Has anybody tried this? Good. So it's far different than what most people here do, which is smoking it. And both have their ways. But what I'm going to talk about with why I'm bringing up the plants is not to get deeply into it, but using the plant to assist you with lucid dreaming. And that's basically what I'm talking about tonight. People tend to, especially in the West, tend to use a bit more at times than they should. I don't know did anybody see the spate of videos about 5 or 6 years ago of kids smoking salvia and freaking out on YouTube? For God's sake. It's like, what is going on with that? Well, no guides, They don't have guides. They don't know, and it's like, a kid takes a hit of 5X and is like, out of here. 10X, he's out of here. And it's, you see people running into walls and stuff like that. It's terrible. But for lucid dreaming, here's a way to do it. There's 2 ways to do it. My preferred method is the quid. And the quid is an interesting method. So you take between 5 to 20 leaves, and for our methods for lucid dreaming, I have some suggestions about that. One, you take the stem out of the middle. You roll it up, and you chew it. But you hold it in there. You need to be in complete darkness. You should have a bowl by your side where you can spit out to it. You should have somebody sitting with you, okay? This is really important because you're going to be entering in a space. But the other point that I'm going to make is that, what about the lucid dreaming? Well, you're going to be doing this about midnight. And you're going to have access to a bed. And you're going to be ready to completely relax and to go from that state into sleep. Now, the quid method will transform you probably into a great plant, okay? You'll start thinking like a plant. Actually, the plant starts thinking through you. It's a form of possession in its own way. And it's important to experience that because the plant is looking through you as you are looking through the plant. It's not a one-way dialogue at all. People say, plant, animal, plant, animal. It's not as graduated as we'd think. So with this experience, you go into it, and you should have a notebook by your bed for the next morning. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can set your intention beforehand. You can take a chance, see what happens, and just go into it. There's nothing wrong with curiosity. I'm not a purist in that respect. It's like, it's got to be sacred. No. It's okay to explore, okay? Because you're exploring consciousness, and you're exploring the twinning of consciousness between you and the plant. Now, the weird thing about salvia is that sometimes it gives you a choice, because you've got, how would you say, I'm really bad with a mic, I'm sorry. You can come back to several choices of different lifetimes, because oftentimes with salvia, you'll see parallel lifetimes. You can make these choices. Next morning you wake up and you'll have had visions with this. So if you don't have access to the quid and you have something, say like 5x or 10x or the tincture, this is the way you do it. Okay, so instead of doing the one full dose, which turns you over and flips you around and beats you down through this giant spiral into the heart of the universe. It does. I mean, the first time I ever did it, was like, oh my God. And I was like, what's happening to me? Oh, no. Well, it was kind of good. And it only lasts like 5 minutes, people think, okay? So with smoking it, what you do is you take the dose that you normally do and take 4, divide it out in 4 even doses, or 3. Smoke a little bit of it, wait 2 minutes, smoke a little more, and then smoke a little more, and be ready to go to sleep. Now this plant really likes people. And she'll let you know this. It's pretty amazing. It's like you'll have this dialogue, and it will tell you where you've screwed up in your life. It will show you the examples. That's why you have that notebook for the dreams in the morning, And it will give you the hints of what you're going to do with your life. I've been growing it, as I said, for 25 years, and I've seen the use of it wax and wane. It chooses its own people. Some people it just kicks right out. It's like, oh, that was terrible. Oh, God, I can't look at that one again. Oh, but she is a thing of beauty and a communicator. And, it's like any plant has to be treated with respect. So I'm going to move on from that. Has anybody ever tried DMT in here? Okay, I just want to say that it is a Schedule 1 and you're very naughty. Okay, and with that said, I've been around it since 1967. And it's amazing how long it took for it to become popular. And I thank Mr. McKenna for that, It's like during the 90s in Portland, everybody was running around, do you have DMT? Do you have DMT? And it was like everybody was crazed for it. Now, of course, it's 5-MeO-DMT. It's like drug fads. But DMT is a very honorable substance. Most of it comes from, that we get around here, some which I've heard about, okay, is derived from acacia plants, okay, from the roots. And that's all well found and everything, but it's not really pure DMT. It has some 5-MeO and some bufotenin with it, so it's just a bit different. I mean, if you ever have done, which I can't say that I have, of, say, straight stuff from Psychotropy viridis, it's far different than what you usually see and get. Usually this plant, if they say it's from this plant, it'll be white, the powder. If it's from the mimosa or the acacia plants, it's usually a little bit orange, maybe a bit yellow. And most of the stuff that comes out of like the laboratory is just white. So how do you use this for dreams? Well, that's the question, isn't it? It's like, this is supposed to be the rocket plant, the rocket fuel and all the rest of it. Okay, it's like most people go in at around 35 to 40 milligrams, and things are kind of weird at that point, and you go a little higher and it's much weirder than that point. And then you don't want to do it anymore because it was so weird. But I'm not talking about that level. I'm talking about a manageable level. And this level, believe it or not, is like half, just go half. You don't have to do any more than that. And again, be in the bed. Let it be midnight. Why midnight? Does anybody have an answer for that? It's a bit of magic. Come on, there's magicians in there. Fairy time is a good point, but you're between two worlds. You're at the change from one cycle into another. The world gets thin at that point. So you're able to access these different realms. And that's a great thing when you think about it. But again, we're going back to the whole thing about the DMT. So I suggest 20 to 25 milligrams. You can divide it up if you like, or you can go ahead and just do it straight. But be ready to have your head on the bed and to fall asleep. Okay, so it is quite amazing. It really is quite amazing. So I'd like to go back a little bit about salvia for a second. I'm going to jump back and forth because I'm not using the notes. So how many people have used salvia out here? Wow, look at this. Good. So there was a salvia conference at Brighton Bush. It was the first and only salvia conference in the United States. And it was put on by Botanical Corps with Rob Montgomery. Does anybody remember him? Yeah, Jonathan Ott was there. It was like superstars everywhere. Well, Daniel Seibert, who has this website, and he was one of the huge promoters of salvia, was there. And I had this experience where I'd done the little levels out and laid down in bed, because I've been working with dreams for a long time. And I had this experience. And I had to tell Daniel about this experience, because we were friends, and I sold T-shirts on the site, You might see them around sometime, but they're pretty much all rags now. But he was standing there, and I came up to him, and I said, Daniel, I have to tell you this story. He says, well, what is it? And he says, well, I took the salvia, and the next thing I knew, I'm flying through this desert. And it's like all these cactuses. And it's like a 1930s cartoon where the cactuses have sombreros and they're all dancing and everything. And he said, well, that's odd. Yeah, I said, yeah, it was great. It was a real cartoon world. He says, the next thing I know, I'm going up this pathway, up into the hills. And it's getting greener and greener and greener. And all of a sudden, there's a village ahead. And I zoom to the village, and there's this villager standing there. And I'm like right here to the villager. And he goes like this. And I zoom up to where he's pointing. And this is a huge mass of Salvia divinorum. And I dive into it. And when I dive into it, I realize I'm a hummingbird. So Daniel looked at me and he said, you've just described the way you get to those villages from the west part of Mexico. I've never been there. So here's a plant that can, inform you. So back to DMT. So with DMT, we have, it's been fairly well explored at this point. And a lot of people are doing mapping with it and everything. It's like keeping a dream journal for when you go and do these experiences, because you don't really want to lose them. And DMT operates like salvia, seemingly really quick. But the truth of the matter is that it lasts for hours. Not up here, not in the forebrain, but it is processing. It's like people who take mushrooms talk about the little doctors or with ayahuasca. DMT is doing the same thing. It's working through your system. Salvia does it as well. You just have to start to, how would you say, open up enough where you can be aware of this. Good water. I'll give you an experience that I had with DMT. It was a lower dose, it was just before I went to sleep. And I took a hit of this. And the next thing I knew, I was like in this great chamber. It was like this crystalline chamber. Has anybody ever had this experience? Have seen this chamber? Okay. But it's like all of a sudden I'm falling. And I'm coming down, 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 down. Like that, right? And all of a sudden I crash through what's like glass, but it's actually just crystals. And it's like one layer after another. And it's like a skylight above now. And all of a sudden I come partway down, and there is a group, this is good, there's a group of mantises and arachnids having a discussion. And they all look over the edge at me like this as I go down. So, is this useful? I don't know, but it's interesting. What was I seeing? What were they seeing? This is crazy stuff, but it's valuable for some reason. Okay. When my wife was over in the UK visiting family for a month, I got involved with DMT like nearly nightly. I was like trying to reach out to her psychically, trying to project myself over to Scotland, to no avail. I was trying to make it do what I wanted it to do. But I will tell you this, is that salvia, DMT, and a lot of these plants, after you use them, your sense of being is pretty clarified, okay? And you need to use these sparingly if you can. I mean, I've done it lots of times, and that's not necessarily always good, but I have the experience, okay? I was there. Okay, thank you. So, anyway, the next plant I would like to talk about is Kalia zakatichi, or tichichi. Has anybody used this? Got 1, 2, 3. So, I used to grow this as well, but Kalia zakatichi. That is the Nahuatl term, and it means, I'll look up the term here. It's one of those. Does anybody have Dale Pendle's book of Pharmacopoeia? Okay. He has a really good section there on that. Hold on. That's not you. How about that? It's disappeared. Okay. It's a member of the sunflower family. And it's used mainly by the Chantal Indians down again in Oaxaca. Oaxaca is quite the hot spot for plants and mushrooms and things like that. They've had to put up with all of us going down and visiting. which I'm sure is always thrilling for the villagers when the gringos show up. But there is some good research going on now. There's a group of people that are now setting up a facility down there to help the people locally organize to keep their culture, and they're digitizing everything. A friend of mine, Chris Casus, is doing this, and he's been working with Maria Sabrina's family and her descendants and all the rest of it. And it's good, you know, it's like, they're trying to preserve their way without the place being overrun, which I'm all for. So, Kalia, you use it a bit differently. It is not what you call a classic psychedelic at all, nor is salvia, but we'll go back to that sometime maybe. Kalia, I like fresh leaves, okay? I'm really big into fresh leaves. So, Kalia, you take a big handful and you make a pot of tea and you drink that down. And you take some of the dried leaves and just before bed you smoke a cigarette or a joint, if you want to call it that, of the stuff. Well, I have used this off and on for years, and it is one of the plants that I find for myself to be most helpful. Again, psychologically afterwards, there's a glow for a long time, but it is a foreteller. And I have no idea how this works. Okay, I'm just as puzzled. I'm a student just as the rest of you are students, okay? That's the way of the world. The plants are the teachers as far as I'm concerned. And that's the truth of it for me. But this plant, when used properly, can deliver some very, very interesting stories. And here's one as an example. I drank the tea, and I went to sleep, and I was walking. And I was walking up along this coastal cliff, and there's this village. And I walk into the village, and then I follow this path down, and down, 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 and all of a sudden you can hear the surf pounding, right? And I find myself standing on this promontory and looking out, and it's like rocks going out into the ocean. And I told this to a friend of mine from Washington, Spencer, and he was like, I said, what? And he said, well, that's on the Macaw Reservation where you described. And I've never been to the Macaw Reservation. Again, this is like, how does this work? You know, do we project ourselves out? But it's like, I'm visiting places with this. So, with Kalia, it's obtainable. It's very obtainable. It's absolutely legal, so that's good news. Salvia is legal here. It's not legal everywhere in the States. It's illegal in Australia. DMT, again, as I said, illegal. But when it grows like this, she's fine. You can't even chew those leaves to get anything out of them at this point, being wintertime. It's true. It's true. You know this. This plant really loves heat, okay? Heat and humidity. So, the next plant that I'm going to talk about is a little iffy. It's has anybody ever tried Sibyl? Anybody? Sibyl? Nope. Andanathera colubrina? Yeah, okay. Well, we don't really see it much. You can see them occasionally in botanical gardens. They're trees, a mimosa tree. This plant is very interesting. And here's the preparation for it. You get these little seeds. You pop them into a toaster. Don't burn them, but let them they actually make a weird noise. and it kind of like a popping sound. You want to remove the outer casing. Then the seed, you chop up the plant, and for anybody doing it for the first time, I'm going to make a suggestion. A quarter of a seed. Okay? This is the way that you stay alive with things. Okay, because I'm going to read you out some compounds here that's in here. So, and then if that doesn't do anything the next time, which could be a half an hour later because it goes through the system like that, you could go a half a seed. Okay. One thing you will notice is that there'll be heart palpitations, you'll be a little sweaty and hot. Okay, so this plant has been around for a long time and has informed civilizations across the Andean complex. Okay, and it is an amazing plant. I'm going to read you some of the ingredients of the stew that's in this plant. So it's 5-OH, DMT, MMT, good God, DMT in oxide, 5-OH, DMT, S oxide. And I'm not going to describe what all those are, but I like the DMT part for sure. But it's called Andanathera colubrina. I can certainly do that. Hold on here. After I put my glasses on. ANADENANTHERA colubrina, COLUBRINA. And again, please proceed with caution. I'm not advocating you using this, but if you do. So, some people get up to 2 seeds. I have. So this is perhaps the most ancient of plants used for psychoactive and psychedelic purposes in South America. It is said to be the early culture, the Tiahuanaco, literally the city of the gods. This is the mother civilization of all following Andean cultures. The seed has been traced back of use for 4,500 years. Graves from that time period, almost every grave has the seeds in there. They use it as a snuff as well, okay? And if you like snorting stuff, okay, you're going to have to use some baking soda or lime from shells to do it. So, a short story on this plant. First time I did it, again, it was like midnight, and I'm walking through this really dusty area, and there's all these trees in the distance, right, and they're waving in the wind, and there's this village of people, and they all come up to me, and they're talking, and they're welcoming and hugging me and taking me in, and it's the trees, okay? It was the plant. It was welcoming me to the experience. The next time I did it, I had one of these beings jumping in and out of my chest really for a long time, so I probably did too much of it. But it was like hopping in, hopping out, hopping in, hopping out, and it was kind of wild. But this is, again, one of those plants that if you do it in the proper way, it will induce lucid dreaming, and you'll come back and you'll be able to write stuff down, and you can ask. This plant is used often for hunting. Like ayahuasca, originally one of the main uses of ayahuasca was that it was for finding game, and also it was the South American version of TV. No, really, all that green all the time, you want a bit of color, okay? But, so we've been talking about plants, and I want to say that if you're going to be working with lucid dreaming and stuff like that, you must realize that this whole practice of what is actually called, I call it a lot of people call it, dream incubation. Has anybody heard this term before? Okay. So, in the Caucasus, they have found these old temples going back 4,500 years, maybe more. And in these temples have these little cells. And what they have found within these cells, a little platform for somebody to lay on. And this platform, what they found in conjunction with this is, they found like stone bowls, et cetera, and et cetera. And within these bowls, they found some very interesting things. Okay, so this is Indo-European stuff. So we're talking, civilization that runs from Iran, the Caucasus, all the way over to Ireland, into North Africa, etc. And in this culture, almost across the whole lot of the ancient forms of it were these kind of temples. And what they found in these temples were 3 or 4 distinct plants. One which I was going to talk about tonight, but it gets a bad rap because of the way people use its derivatives. Opium, cannabis, ephedra, and I can't remember which of the tropanes, but one of the tropane plants, maybe monk's hood or wolf's bane. And they find that this kind of idea of a temple for sleep and healing goes right across the ancient world. You find them in Egypt. In Egypt, they were temples like in Panopolis, Temple of Ptah, and the priest would treat people with what's called blue lotus. Has anybody tried this? Blue lotus? Okay. Opium again. Cannabis again. Okay. Cannabis is everywhere. Have you noticed this lately? It's just everywhere. But there's a reason for it. We have a receptor in there, just like we have a receptor for cannabis. So they find these temple complexes. They had them in Greece. The Asclepion. Does anybody know this term? Okay. And they did the same thing. How are we doing? Okay. So we're moving along here. So what I'm talking about is a tradition. And I want to connect you with these traditions in the fact that, yes, this seems all very modern and everything, but it isn't. This is what we've been doing forever. And don't forget that. And why do we do it? We do it first to heal the self, so that the self can heal the community. Okay? We don't do it just for ourselves. We do it for those that come after. And I can't emphasize that enough, but we have to think in the long term. How do I clear stuff out of my life so that I'm not such a butt? I don't want to spill stuff on people. So it's about healing, okay? And it's okay to have the experience just for the experience. But what I really want to emphasize is this is about doing the work. You can do all the plants in the world, but if you don't come back and do something afterwards, it's really just a dry run. Because the plants will reveal, okay? And eventually you'll learn the techniques with the plants and without, how to work on the self so that you liberate the self so that it can give more, give back to all the other individuations around it. We are a seed group here, like people here, okay? What is there, 700,000 people right in the metro area now? This type of group like this has a huge effect by the way we treat people with courtesy and love. So these plants should teach us manners, or at least we should adopt some manners. The plants are very gentle in their own way, unless you do too much, and then they just beat the heck out of you. So, in that respect, we have to think, okay, we have these ancient complexes, we have these ancient practices. What can I do in my group of people, okay? And you all have a group of people that are close to you, okay? Choose the plant that works best for you and team up together, okay? Sit for your friends. If you're doing salvia, have somebody sit for you and you sit for them, okay? Talk about the experience. Talk about the dreams that you see. Talk about the realities that you encounter, because there are multitudes of them. And each one of us has a certain focus that we bring something unique to the discussion. Now, we can do this, and it's been a practice for a long time in the psychedelic underground. This underground did not start in 1963. It has been continuous or reemerged forever in the West. It was continuous here in the Americas. It's been continuous in Africa and Asia. And we can change the world for the better with this. So that's enough preaching now. So I'm going to ask, has anybody here worked with lucid dreaming much? Okay. Yeah, dream diaries. Have you followed your dreams? Okay. Well, here's one that you might like. So, dreaming can occur whilst awake and whilst asleep. And I had an experience once with lucid dreaming where I was about 25 years old, and I realized that my life was kind of like spiraling weirdly. So I started working on things and deciding what to do with my life, and I'd been living out in the islands, and I'd come back to the States. And I woke up one morning, and I was sitting in a yoga position in my bed, but I discovered that I was actually floating about 4 inches off of the bed. So I said, that's unique. Never had that happen before. So I pinched myself, and slowly I came down. I said, must have been a dream. So went back to sleep, woke up again. The same thing was occurring. Was it a dream? Was it a reality? I can't tell. And that's part of the thing for me for lucid dreaming. I can't tell sometimes when it is either here or there. Okay, and it's like, what was that dream telling me? Well, it certainly was telling me that I was doing something that was affecting my inner self. Now, some of the dreams and some of the work that I've done with this have helped me immensely. One of the experiences that I had was, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but at the age of 7, my father was a military navigator, and we were stepping outside of not a Quonset. It's where you go in to look at the stars on the projection screen. That's it. It was. We were going for the midwinter show at the Air Force Academy, and when I stepped outside and I looked up at the stars, and I saw Polaris. I said, "Dad, Polaris." He says, "Very good, son." And I started walking away, and I said, "You know, when I get to be older, I'm going to marry a woman from Britain." And I promptly forgot about it. So, cut to that period just before that floating dream. I'm out in Hawaii. I'm living in the North Shore. I work at an estate that has its private beach, private lagoon. I pick up palm fronds in the morning and serve drinks in the afternoon, and can drink and eat and do whatever I want. It's a perfect job for a young man. But I woke up one morning, and it was like I walked over to the guy who owned the place, and I said, I gotta go. He says, what do you mean you gotta go? He says, I've got to go to Europe. And he says, you're always welcome back. I said, fine, thanks. And I took off to LA 3 days later, got 2 jobs, worked for a year and a half, and went off to Europe. And eventually I got married to this really wonderful woman from Scotland. And it wasn't until after I was married that I remembered the 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid having that dream. So, what we are working with is multiple layers of reality. Time is not linear, okay? It's coming and going constantly, okay? We are an experience at this moment. And I just want to say, these dreams, the stuff that you get from your lucid dreaming, can serve as a guide. Some of it will be pure gibberish, and I'm really well aware of it, but there's gold amongst that dross. Just keep writing it down. And if you use the plants, use them in a disciplined method. That's it.
That was great. Thank you so much. Let's have another round of applause for Gwyllm. So we're going to take some Q&A, so everybody stay seated. We're going to start passing the index cards around for you to write, what do you want to know about psychedelics that are afraid to ask, and what kind of programming do you want to see? So please take a card, pass it back to your neighbors. Please fill it out. Chris has a bunch moving through here. And now what I'm going to do is walk around the room and start taking questions from y'all for the next 10, 15 minutes. So let's see some hands. Who has some questions here for Gwyllm? Okay, I see on this side. I'm sorry? And the questions I was asked to repeat real quick are, what do you want to know about psychedelics but are afraid to ask? And what kind of programming do you want to see from the Portland Psychedelic Society? And just pass them up to us at the end. Okay, first question here.
First of all, thank you. Do you consider shamanic journey, drum journey, or sonic driving journey to be a form of lucid dreaming also?
Well, it certainly is one of the tools of ecstasy. And I have been drummed into a state. It is like they have a different modality, and I do think it works. It's like trance dancing. You can do the same thing with dancing. But yes, I do consider it very similar in that respect.
Thank you again. And out of curiosity, what has been your experience with the International Association with the Study of Dreams, and will you be attending the regional conference in Ashland this June?
The City of Dreams?
International Association for the Study of Dreams, IASD.
No, I've had no. I have to explain. I've pretty much worked in the underground most of my life. Okay, I mean, I first hit the road when I was 14, and I never stopped. So all of my experience with psychedelics and dream work and stuff, I did work with fourth way schools, and I did work with Jungian folks and stuff like that in the early 70s. And that's where a lot of the dream stuff that I developed came out of. I find if you should have his works, just as you should have William Butler Yeats' works as well if you want dreams. So, yes, I haven't, but I would be interested in attending.
Next question is over here.
I'm wondering if you have any guidance for journeying through the realm of lucid dreams as far as just what learning and what is available in those realms.
Okay, generally speaking, I use it to plot my life, okay? I follow dreams. That sounds weird maybe, but I find that if you work with it enough, a pattern emerges, okay? And you'll start recognizing the symbols. And you must look at them and write them down and study them. I don't know, it's like people use the tarot, you know, or the power cards or the I Ching, stuff like that. It's very similar. I mean, they're all comparable disciplines. But this one, lucid dreaming, is far older than the I Ching. And it's far older than, say, you know, most of the modalities. They think that lucid dreaming isn't just really tied to humans, okay? Animals certainly show it. Hasn't anybody ever seen a dog start running in its sleep? How can it starts whimpering and it's making this noise? Or you see a cat, the cat's like slashing at something, okay? And it's like, what is going on with the animals when they're hibernating for like 3-4 months? Where are these guys going, okay? Because if you look at the films, you know, they run a video inside a burrow, they're constantly moving, you know? They're living their lives over there. One of the big points about dreams and stuff is that this life, this conscious life, is a part of it, but it's not the only reality that we live in. We live in dream time. In many cultures, this is the hallucination. Okay? The dreams are where things happen, are real. And I kind of look at the idea of, has anybody read Plato's Republic? Okay. So, you know the cave. And in the cave, everybody's chained up and they're looking at the wall. And what they're seeing is shadow, right? And then they finally get exposed to the sun. Well, I found with lucid dreaming that the cave that I go to and the cave that I see is a place where there's this great dialogue going on. And it's all these voices and all of these discussions going on and different beings working with other beings, conversations, jokes, laughter. And I wake up in the morning and I feel like I've been in a seminar for like 6 hours. So, and I'm not tired with it, but it's like, well, that was busy.
Next question is here in the back.
Thank you. I'm curious about your experience with Yopo and whether that was the seeds that you were referring to before, and particularly your experience in regards to lucid dreaming with Yopo.
Okay, so it's a slightly different seed. Okay, they're cousins. So I have stuck with the colabrina, but I haven't used Yopo. But I used it for a couple of years, off and on. And it was like opening up a book to a place that I hadn't seen before. And this is the weird experience with it. It's like the plant and the way that it talked to me. But it was one of the things that you're seeing the art back here. A lot of this art came to me through dreams. There's one piece that I didn't put up here was where I was smoking salvia for the whole picture, and every time I'd come out, I'd draw a salvia plant afterwards. And it's a giant mandala that I have at my house. But to your question, Yopo, you know, it's used by some people, you know, like I said, like almost like TV. There's some people use it daily down there, okay? So is it still, in that respect, sacred to them? Or has it become like a fashion for them, or, you know, like drinking a beer? You know, and that's a real danger, I think, with it. But Yopo in itself will just knock you on your butt. At least the simple seeds will, for sure. So, and they all have those really weird compounds. It's just not DMT in it. So you have to be careful with the bufotofen.
Next question is in the back.
I was just curious what your thoughts are on more mundane dreams, and if, for myself, say maybe 1 in 10 dreams seem deeply profound, and the rest seem very, very mundane, and it makes me wonder. Because my thoughts in my waking life actually feel more colorful often.
It could be that you're cycling. Okay, it's like sometimes with dreams we're processing what goes on during the daytime. Some of the mundane stuff bubbles up, that happens. Oftentimes I find myself working. You know, it's like working away all night. I'm exhausted by the time I get up, you know. But there is a reason for things to be mundane. Everything doesn't have to be spectacular, you know? It's okay for dreams to be just stories drifting past.
Other questions? Yes.
Is there any kind of compendium for like the imagery that comes up in the dreams a lot? Like what particular things would mean, perhaps?
Yes, I mean some of Jung's books on dreams. There's a lot of stuff online right now. There's a huge interest in this. If you run in dream interpretation books, like say on DuckDuckGo or Bing or Google, you'll find several books. I would start with Jung. That's my preferred. Okay, he really, for the West, laid a lot of it out. You might look at the works. Well, there's, oh God, let's see, I'm trying to remember the woman's name. She from back east. Anyway, I'll think about this. I'll give you a card, and you can email me, and I'll look it up for you.
And you'll be able also to talk to Gwyllm after this. So we have time for just 2 more questions, and I see both of our audience members there, so here's our first.
So first of all, I just wanted to clarify for the one person who was asking about Yopo versus Anandranandra Colabrina. I believe that Anandranandra Colabrina is also known as Vilka in snuff form and is sometimes used with Wachuma, if that's correct. And my question was, I'm just wondering, at what point do you differentiate kind of in the visuals between what is like the world of that specific plant, so to speak, and what is your internal world?
Well, that's a good one. It's obviously using my receptors, you know, so it's firing off of that. Well, Vilka is used, like you say, with tobacco derivatives and stuff like that. Tobacco is perhaps the entheogenic plant par excellence for a lot of these different complexes from North America down to South America. As far as images, they are different, okay, than the pattern. If we're talking about like how the pattern registers, okay, there's this whole thing about the patterns being snaky. Does this make sense? A lot of black and white patterns. It's not like screaming colors like the Aya complex or like DMT in that respect, even though there is DMT in there. The patterns tend to move from the center out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I was more asking just different plants in general, like have you have a grasp on, oh, this is something from the world of the plant versus this is something more specific to me from my life.
I think that sounds like a follow-up question for afterwards. We have to get one more question in, but Gwyllm will be here right after.
So I was wondering about like people that suffer from like sleep disturbances or insomnia or having like really like not being able to identify. I've been trying to journal like what my dreams are and stuff, but do you think that psychedelics can help like maybe bring that out more to the surface as to identify what is actually going on when you're sleeping?
I found that, okay, well, if I were to, I'm not a doctor, okay, but what I could recommend is, one, if you're having sleep problems, you know, there's several teas you could use, and you probably have done that already, so I would try something like maybe if you have a friend that has access to salvia, because it tends to relax one pretty well if you go into it slowly. So also a thing of centering. Do you find your thoughts flying backwards and forwards a lot? Okay, so here's a very easy thing, and you don't have to use a plant for that at all, okay? So it's an old thing. Be here, okay? Quit being anxious about the future. Quit regretting about the past. Be present. Breathe fully when you're in bed, okay? Breathe deeply. Oftentimes, I find that if I'm having trouble sleeping like that, it's because my creative wires are burning strong, and you might be having a creative drive, and it's like I get really active at 10 o'clock at night with art, and I can go till maybe 6 in the morning, and I'm burned out the next day, or sometimes I go 12 hours, but it could be that you have a creative cycle that you're not quite aware of at this point, and it's trying to come through.
It's also important to note that, just as there's legal gray areas, none of this is medical advice.
That's
so
right.
Please do consult with a physician on any of these medicalized areas. We have just enough time for a very brief question and a very brief answer before we're all able to mingle with each other. So,
yeah, I was curious if there are beings or places that you've repeatedly visited, and if that has any meaning, or if there's anything you'd like to share about that.
Well, yes. One of the places, well, I've had some encounters with different beings, mostly with salvia, and also as well with like DMT and stuff like that, where the same creatures will appear, like with DMT, it's like mantises and stuff like that. But I've also experienced with mushrooms beings of light, just pure light, like orbs floating. And one of the things of mushrooms is you tend to be able to see 360 degrees around you. How does that work? Anyway, you can see some wonderful things, but yes, I have had repeated experiences with beings. Some of it I can't really talk about because it's hard to express it, if that makes sense.
But you can certainly see it in the work.
Yeah.
So first of all, before we adjourn, once again, please do bring your postcards up front. Please do sign up on our iPad for our email newsletter list. Some of our upcoming events on the 31st of January, so next week, we have LSD, Stan Groff, and the Myth of the Bad Trip at Geodesic Art Collective. Coming up, how many in here are professionals in the psychology or medical space? Well, then we have a meetup just for you, mental health and medical professionals, psychedelic clients and patients. This is for mental health and medical professionals only. This is on February 6th at Tabor Space. We also have upcoming events for women exploring psychedelics, people of color in psychedelics, and a psychedelic men's group. And our next event here at the Clinton Street Theater is going to be on February 12th. It's called My Trippy Valentine. It's an evening of psychedelic storytelling about psychedelics, empathy, relationships, good trips, bad trips, heartbreak, heartache, soulmate, all of this and everything in between. So if those of you out here have some stories to tell, fiction, nonfiction, life experience, or about a friend, please do pick up one of these and submit your stories. We want to hear from you. The Portland Psychedelic Society is a community, and you are the soul of it. So let's give it up for Gwyllm Llywdd one more time. Please do bring those postcards down front. Please do come down front and grab one of our newsletters, sign up for our mailing list, and get some of Gwyllm's incredible art. Thank you all for coming out tonight.